Penguin Random House Audio presents The Wizard and the Prophet, two remarkable scientists and their dueling visions of tomorrow's world, by Charles C. Mann. Read for you by Bronson Pinchot. To Ray. Just 2 words, because 1,000 would not be enough. No wonder they disagreed so endlessly. They were talking about different things. Robert L. Heilbronner. Prologue. All parents must remember the moment when they first held their children, the tiny, crumpled face emerging, an entire new person from the hospital blanket. I extended my hands and took my daughter in my arms. I was so overwhelmed that I could hardly think. After the birth, I wandered outside for a while so that mother and child could rest. It was 3 a.m, late February in New England. There was ice on the sidewalk and a cold drizzle in the air. As I stepped from the curb, a thought popped into my head. When my daughter is my age, almost 10 billion people will be walking the earth. I stopped in mid-stride. I thought, how is that going to work? Like other parents, I want my children to be comfortable in their adult lives, but in the hospital parking lot, this suddenly seemed unlikely. 10 billion mouths, I thought. How can they possibly be fed? 20 billion feet. How will they be shod? 10 billion bodies. How will they be accommodated? Is the world big enough, rich enough for all these people to flourish? Or have I brought my children into a time of general collapse? When I began as a journalist, I envisioned myself, romantically, as an eyewitness to history. I wanted to chronicle the important events of my time. Only after I began work did the obvious question occur. What are those important events? My first article, essentially the caption for a photograph of a bad automobile accident, certainly didn't document one. But what was the standard? Hundreds of years from now, what will historians view as today's most significant developments? For a long time, I believed that the answer was discoveries in science and technology. I wanted to learn about the curing of diseases, the rise of computer power, the unraveling of the mysteries of matter and energy. Later, though, it seemed to me that what was important was less the new knowledge than what it had enabled. In the 1970s, when I was in high school, about 1 out of every 4 people in the world was hungry, undernourished, to use the term preferred by the United Nations. Today, the UN says the figure is 1 out of 10. Footnote. In absolute terms, the decrease seems less impressive. Several hundred million still live in destitution. In recent years, moreover, the number of hungry has risen a bit. Researchers disagree on whether this reversal is a long-term problem or a temporary blip due to violence. Southwest Asia, parts of Africa, and falling commodity prices, which have lowered national incomes in some places. Nonetheless, a child born in the 21st century has less chance of emerging into a life of absolute want than at any other century in known history. In those 4 decades, the global average lifespan has risen by more than 11 years, with most of the increase occurring in poor places. Hundreds of millions of people in Asia, Latin America, and Africa have lifted themselves from destitution into something like the middle class. In the annals of humankind, nothing like this surge of well-being has occurred before. It is the signal accomplishment of this generation and its predecessor. This enrichment has not occurred evenly or equitably. Millions upon millions are not prosperous, and millions more are falling behind. Nonetheless, on a global level, the level of 10 billion, the increase in affluence is undeniable. The factory worker in Pennsylvania and the farmer in Pakistan may both be struggling and angry, but they are also by the standards of the past, wealthy people. Today the world has about 7.3 billion inhabitants. Most demographers believe that around 2050 the world's population will reach 10 billion, or a bit less. About this time, human numbers will probably begin to level off. As a species, we will be around replacement level, each couple having, on average, just enough children to replace themselves. All the while, economists say, the world's development should continue, however unevenly, however slowly. The implication is that when my daughter is my age, a sizable percentage of the world's 10 billion souls will be middle class. Jobs, homes, cars, fancy electronics, a few occasional treats. These are what the affluent multitudes will want. Why shouldn't they? And though the lesson of history is that the great majority of these men and women will make their way, it is hard not to be awed by the magnitude of the task facing our children. A couple of billion jobs, a couple of billion homes, a couple of billion cars, billions and billions of occasional treats. Can we provide these things? That is only part of the question. The full question is, can we provide these things without wrecking much else? As my children were growing up, I took advantage of journalistic assignments to speak, from time to time, with experts in Europe, Asia, and the Americas. Over the years, as the conversations accumulated, it seemed to me that the responses to my questions fell into two broad categories, each associated, at least in my mind, with one of two people, Americans who lived in the 20th century. Neither is well known to the public, yet one man has often been called the most important person born in that century, and the other is the principal founder of the most significant cultural and intellectual movement of that time. Both recognized and tried to solve the fundamental question that will face my children's generation: how to survive the next century without a wrenching global catastrophe. The two people were barely acquainted with each other. They met only once, so far as I know, and had little regard for each other's work. But in their different ways, they were largely responsible for the creation of the basic intellectual blueprints that institutions around the world use today for understanding our environmental dilemmas. Unfortunately, their blueprints are mutually contradictory, for they had radically different answers to the question of survival. The two people were William Vogt and Norman Borlaug. Vogt, born in 1902, laid out the basic ideas for the modern environmental movement. In particular, he founded what the Hampshire College demographer Betsy Hartman has called apocalyptic environmentalism, the belief that unless humankind drastically reduces consumption, its growing numbers and appetite will overwhelm the planet's ecosystems. In best-selling books and powerful speeches, Vogt argued that affluence is not our greatest achievement, but our biggest problem. Our prosperity is temporary, he said, because it is based on taking more from Earth than it can give. If we continue, the unavoidable result will be devastation on a global scale, perhaps including our extinction. Cut back, was his mantra, otherwise everyone will lose. Borlaug, born 12 years later, has become the emblem of what has been termed techno-optimism or cornucopianism. The view that science and technology, properly applied, can help us produce our way out of our predicament. Exemplifying this idea, Borlaug was the primary figure in the research that in the 1960s created the Green Revolution, the combination of high-yielding crop varieties and agronomic techniques that raised grain harvests around the world, helping to avert tens of millions of deaths from hunger. To Borlaug, affluence was not the problem, but the solution. Only by getting richer, smarter, and more knowledgeable can humankind create the science that will resolve our environmental dilemmas. Innovate, innovate, was Borlaug's cry. Only in that way can everyone win. Both Borlaug and Vogt thought of themselves as environmentalists facing a planetary crisis. Both worked with others whose contributions, though vital, were overshadowed by theirs.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?